Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Car Ride Conversations. This is the segment of my podcast, The Backstage, that brings the podcast to the guests. I do that during election time. It gives me the opportunity to meet and to talk with different candidates from different parties, and it brings you great value and information. Today I'm in the riding of St. Rose in the region of Laval. We're talking with the incumbent MNA and candidate for the CAQ, the Coalition Avenir Quebec, Christopher Skeete. Enjoy the podcast. All right, Christopher Skeete, incumbent MNA and candidate for the CAQ in St. Rose. How's it going?
It's going well, man. It's going well. Yeah, we're on day, 9 now?
Who knows? Are you keeping track?
Yeah, of course I'm keeping track, man. This is what I'm all about. This is what the campaign's all about. We're on day 9.
I used to lose my senses after like day 5.
Yeah.
And then come back to my senses like the week before the the D-Day.
No, we're on day 9, and the Premier just made a big announcement this morning about how we're going to transition our economy towards a greener economy. So today's actually a big day for us.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad to see you. We had done this before. It was obviously through a computer screen, so the fact that we can now see each other face to face,
thank goodness.
Feels better, no?
Come on, not to mention, look, the best riding in Quebec. We get to drive around. I get to show you around, brag a little bit.
It's a beautiful little spot, and I have never come up here in Laval.
That's their village.
Yeah, it's like you know. There's this traditional village feel, but a little bit more evolved because, you know, like you're in Laval, so you have your main road. It's kind of like your downtown and your little churches, and It's cute. It's nice.
People forget that Laval used to be 14 cities.
Okay.
So you have Le Vieux Saint-Rose, which used to be like the downtown of Saint-Rose, and then you have like the Vieux Saint-Vincent-de-Paul, and that's like the old. So every 14 place had like their own rue principale, right? You get that village feel in a lot of sectors, and I'm going to take you through some of my favorite parts.
Nice.
Of the riding.
Okay, let's get through the tough question. There's only one tough question. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll just have fun. All right? Because
Okay.
I need to talk to you about Bill 96.
Yeah.
You were on the podcast a little over a year ago, and I remember, you know, this was the beginning. The consultations were starting in your committee, and I had to talk to you. I wanted to know pretty much if you got any sleep, because I don't know if you were living off the stress. I felt a little, the ground was a little shaky. People were kind of bringing it up a lot. I thought, man, this poor man can't get any sleep. He got the biggest file. Just for everyone listening or watching, you were given the responsibility as a parliamentary secretary to the Premier himself, responsible specifically for relations with the English-speaking Quebecers. So this file, this Bill 96, was really down your alley, right? And I asked you, do you get any sleep? I mean, what's going on? And you reassured me, you reassured the listeners that, look, we got the English community behind us. We have spoken to people. We've spoken to groups. Everything's going to be fine. And you were very reassuring in your statement. A little over a year later, we have leaders of prominent English groups like the Quebec Community Groups Network, the English Montreal School Board. You have Master Jedi, lawyer extraordinaire Julius Gray that will be contesting the bill. You have 2 completely new political parties that were created specifically to grow momentum against your government on this issue. Do you think maybe, do you concede that, even in the slightest, that perhaps Bill 96 created a little bit of division or more frustration than you had initially thought it would?
So there's the only thing I would say to that question is that there's what Bill 96 is, and there's what Bill 96 is perceived to be. Unfortunately, the two often get mixed up. For instance, people often talk to me about, the English community is not going to have access to justice, which is completely impossible because the Constitution guarantees minority rights access to justice. Now you're going to say, no, Mr. Skeete, you guys have used the notwithstanding clause and that removes all our rights. False. The notwithstanding clause only applies to certain sections of the Charter, not every section. And one of the sections that protects access to justice, Section 133, guarantees access. So people perceive it as a big threat. And of course, it's not. Another example, people are like, oh, there's going to be search and seizures in our homes and the cops are going to come. The OQLF is going to become this paramilitary invading force into our homes. And the reality, again, is that the OQLF's investigators are administrative in their mandate. They cannot go beyond the administrative process, which means if they do look into a laptop to make sure that you're running a French version of Windows or a French version of Microsoft Word, that they don't have the mandate to use what they see in any other capacity. Of course, that means understanding what the legal framework is. So there's what it is, George, and then there's what people perceive it to be. I think what we saw in the last year is a lot of institutional distrust. I think the English community is very skittish about all things language in Quebec, and I think what we're seeing is an emotional reaction to that. And I think, you know, it's my job to try and explain it, and my job to always be present to make sure that we can clarify issues of things. But you're right. I've heard what you've heard, and people are concerned. And my job is to keep reaching out and building those bridges.
Because there's specific elements, right, in this bill, and we're not going to go through them now. I mean, the point isn't that. The point is talk to you as a candidate and your riding in general. But we're not going to get to the judicial challenges that your colleague Simon Jolin Barrette is having with Chief Justice of the Superior Court. The notwithstanding clause. All these. There's a lot of elements. I'm just going to talk like one little specific thing, just so I can get your opinion on whether or not it's a little exaggerated. It's the 6-month deadline that you're putting to new immigrants to learning French. I know that your lines are prepared. We heard the Premier over the weekend say that, look, we're giving a much bigger buffer than any other country in the world, where you go and automatically you have to live with the fact that this is the native tongue in the country. But the reality is that, Quebec and Canada in general, it's not like other countries, right? I mean, immigration here, these countries, and even
I'll take a ride over here.
This country and this province essentially was built on the backs of these immigrants. So there's always been this leniency, there's always been this flexibility to allow these new immigrants to settle in and to integrate appropriately. So we can't really, my opinion is that we can't really compare Canada to the rest of the world.
That's surprising, George. Come on, So we have to be not only.
But on that specific issue, look, let me paint the picture for you. Okay? My parents came here in the late 60s. Okay, so it's been almost 60 years now that they've been here. My mom learned French by virtue of her job. She's a daycare educator. She by far, she's not perfect, but she can communicate. She understands. She can get along. My dad probably knows 5-6 words or sentences. Bonjour monsieur, bonjour madame, comment ça va, merci beaucoup, tabarnak maudit grec. Because speaking of, injustices, that's what he heard his entire life over here. He never cared, he never complained. Because the reality is that when all these new immigrants came here, their priority was, I need to work, I need to build a family, provide for my family, make sure they're fine, and ultimately make sure that they have the biggest opportunities, much more than they ever could have dreamt of, either in their country or elsewhere in the world.
I agree.
So French, I can bet my bottom dollar that if they can go back, if there's one thing that they could change, is to learn the French language. They didn't, because in their mind, it was really low on the priority list. There were other things that were much more urgent for them to do.
With that logic, it's always going to be the last thing and the last priority. And then how do we reconcile that with our desire to protect French in North America?
No, I know.
I'm throwing that in the universe.
And I'm 100%.
I'm throwing that into the universe for your listeners, though.
All I'm saying is that.
No, but George, seriously, how do we reconcile what you just said with the reality that in Quebec, French will always be fragile and we always need to do something? So it'll always be on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, below food and shelter.
But the point I'm trying to make, specifically with the new immigrants, when you look at the priorities, even today, if you ask new immigrants today what the priority is, chances are that the answer is going to be pretty much the same as it was almost 60 years ago. And at some point, we just need to acknowledge, when it comes to new immigrants and in immigration in general, that immigration has been one giant, colossal success story in Quebec. And I think that it's been a success story not because of the French language, but because of their contribution to Quebec society. The French language has always been a consequence of this success story, not necessarily the reason for the success story. So I hope to God that French becomes everyone's primary language. But when it comes to new immigrants, I just feel like we're a little bit close-minded. Do you not feel that by telling these new immigrants that you have 6 months to learn French, it's almost equivalent as though you're telling them you're not really welcome here? Or am I exaggerating?
So there's a lot to peel off there, because there's a lot to peel off there. I think, as I said, if you always make French on the hierarchy of needs secondary to, then of course the result, the conclusion, and we're seeing it in the data, the conclusion is loss of French. If you turn right here, we go through a beautiful part of the writing.
Cool.
So I think at some point we have to make it a priority. Second of all, I disagree that it's a handicap. I think in order for you to be successful in Quebec, I don't see how you can be successful in Quebec if you don't learn French. Right now, one of the biggest issues facing your parents' country in Greece is there's a huge influx of immigrants coming into Greece, and a lot of them don't speak Greek. Mm-hmm. So one of the issues that Greece is going through right now is how do we integrate these immigrants into our community? One of the best vectors of integration is language appropriation. So if you want people to be successful in Greece, well then of course they have to learn Greek.
Oh, no, I don't
disagree. So it's always going to be part of your success story, the mastery of the language. So on your question, you say it's a line that we mastered and we're talking about it, and the Premier said it on Radio Can the other day, but it's a very important indicator. In no other country in the world, when you immigrate, like if I were to move to Greece, George, the Greek government's not going to be like, well, Chris, you're from Canada, we understand it's hard for you. Here's some documents in French, or here's some documents in English. No, it's going to be, this is the law of the land. This is the language of the land. Please figure it out. Now, what we're saying in Quebec is we're saying, when you immigrate to Quebec, what are the first steps you're going to be doing? You're going to be looking for an apartment. You're going to be applying for your driver's license. You're going to be applying for your Medicare card. You're going to be applying for your social insurance card. All these things that are required for you to be successfully arrive into Quebec. That takes about 6 months. After we've taken care of your essentials, we're saying at that point, we're going to start being exemplary, because it's important for the Quebec government to be exemplary in matters of language. So, in fact, and I think the Premier is right when he said it this way, we are creating a new right, a right for recent immigrants to be served in their language when they first arrive. But at some point, George, you're going to have to learn French to be successful in Quebec. So, no, some people say 8 months, some people say 3 months, some people say 1 year, some people say 2 years. Moi, je suis parlable. It could be, we can have a discussion about more months, sure. We decided 6 months, and I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Look, again, I think if you look back at the success story that immigration has been, and you can look at all these new immigrants, and a lot of them, like I said, I think they should learn French, and a lot of them would have probably wanted to learn French. They didn't. But that doesn't mean that it hindered the success of Quebec or their own success over here, right? I mean,
there's success for the individual, and I agree with you that immigration has been a tremendous success story. I'm the son of an immigrant, so of course I agree with that. But when you look at the data, though, only about 50% of immigrants are transitioning to French. So what that tells us, George, mathematically, is that if we don't do anything in about 50 years, we're going to see a decline of French, and we're already seeing it.
And it's necessary to counter that. I agree.
Well, so then how do we do it, George? How do I do it?
But you can do it, but not telling them, look, you have 6 months and that's it.
Well, listen, it's not 6 months and then we don't talk to you anymore, George.
I hope not.
It's 6 months, and then the expectation is that you make efforts to learn French.
Right.
And we're also putting tools available for those people to learn French. We're creating Francisation Québec, which is going to be free French classes for everybody, including the English community.
Very good.
The English community gets a new right as well. They get the right to learn and live in French as well, which means all the English people that have trouble finding jobs because their French isn't good enough, we're going to help them learn it.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about you. Your writing. This was your rookie year. A lot of people came in as new MNAs. Probably the last thing on your mind was to hit that wall that was the pandemic that took up pretty much more than half of your mandate. Tell me a little bit about this first year for you.
Yeah, this is not the mandate I had in mind. For me, when I was dreaming of a CAQ government, I saw us doing. If you look at the first year, right, the first year and a half, we were pretty hyperactive. We were a very active government, making substantial changes. And my dream as a CAQ supporter was to say, what would 4 years of that have looked like? And of course, the selfish part of me looks at that and says, we were kind of robbed of a full, real mandate. Mm-hmm. But the other side of me, the more pragmatic and the more cerebral side of me says, you know what? we asked for the job and we got it. And yeah, part of our job was dealing with this pandemic. Part of our mandate was the confidence that people gave us to, confront the unexpected. And I live well with that. I think Quebecers, when they look at it and they say, "Ooh, it's a good thing we chose Monsieur Legault for the pandemic, as opposed to maybe the other people who were there before."
Right. What are your impressions, or like the going into the National Assembly, aside from this aspect of it, the fact, because you're not new in politics, you've been participating, and you've had a couple campaigns that were unfortunately didn't go your way, but finally in 2018 you got in. Aside from that, the pandemic, which kind of ruined everyone's kind of vision of how a first mandate could be.
Yeah.
What other impressions did you have that you're finally there?
Well, first of all, growing up, I always knew I loved politics from the age of 18, 19, 20. I even studied political science at Concordia. So for me, it was always something I knew I loved. I think far in my mind, I dreamt of being elected, but also there in my mind was the doubting that I could ever be elected. I always thought that my name, Christopher Skeete, who's going to vote for Christopher Skeete in Quebec? And I also thought, who's going to vote for a brown guy in Quebec? So I had those doubts that whether or not my dream was possible. But in the end, I tried, and I ended up in a good riding, and it is possible. And that is at on the one side, the realizing a dream, and on the other side, it's also a little bit rewarding to say that, I believed in this place, and this place also can believe in me.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned the whole thing about the racial thing, and how you instinctively you're putting up all these walls. You're like, it'll never work. My name is like 4 syllables. They won't even be able to pronounce it, or whatever it is. And you realize how it's kind of like you were dreaming, because that's not the reality in Quebec. And with certain maybe sporadic events here and there, it's really not the case. Sorry, my phone keeps ringing. But I just want to talk to you a little bit about the climate that we're seeing this time around. You've done elections, many elections before getting elected. I've certainly been involved since the early 2000s. We always expected this antagonism, this kind of competitiveness in politics. We always expected our posters to go missing, or to be vandalized, or to be cut up, or whatever, to be decorated. It was part of the deal, right? I mean, what you're getting into. But it feels that this year, things have gotten a little out of hand, and it's in the discourse. Everyone is talking about it. The health of our democracy. How have we arrived? I mean, we're having candidates getting death threats, volunteers getting stabbed, other MNA's offices getting broken into, and I mean, I never thought we'd ever get there.
Well, I just want to say, I think it's important for politicians to be leaders in this matter, and I just want to say to my colleague Marois, I'm with you. I support you 100%, and if they want to get to you, they're going to have to go through me, and possibly also Greg. But I'll be there, and I'll always support you, and I'll always support all my colleagues, because I think it's important that we lead by example in that regard. That being said, I look at this issue as a political scientist. I look at it as an academic, because I think what we're seeing in all Western democracies is this malaise. An increasingly large number of people feel out of touch with politicians. An increasingly large number of people feel out of touch with their governments and with their opportunities. I think it's the consequence of a lot of issues. I think a lot of reasons why people feel excluded. But I think politicians are going to have to come up with policies that will help those people. I think we need to stop ignoring the elephant in the room, and we need to start recognizing that people aren't doing well.
Right.
I think we have to start listening to what they're trying to tell us. They're trying to tell us that the opportunities that were promised are not being delivered. They're trying to tell us that the economic system doesn't always work well for them. They're trying to tell us that they're working harder than ever, and they're ending up with less. And I think they don't always know how to say it. They don't always know how to express it. But that feeling, I think, is very real, and it's my problem. It's our problem, politicians. We have to fix that. And that means not condescending. It means not judging. I think people who react poorly, we can go right here. I think people who react poorly or don't know how to react by, for instance, being aggressive on social media, by defacing posters of candidates and whatnot, those are a symptom. So I don't judge the symptom, I judge the climate, and I say we need to give these people alternatives to that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your track record. 4 years, some accomplishments, or some that you're particularly proud of.
So that's a question? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you talking locally or nationally? Because I think we can really do...
Whatever you want, whatever you feel most proud of.
For me, I think one of the biggest issues we've had in Laval was this historic underfinancing of per capita of investments in all spheres, be it education, healthcare, culture. These are all things that have been always underinvested in Laval. And Laval has always voted, en bloc. It's always, like, for 15 years, this island was pretty much red. So it wasn't for lack of influence in the caucus, yet underfinancing always existed. With one election, if you'd like, we could maybe turn left here and we'll end up on Dagenet.
Cool.
And with one election, one MNA in the CAQ and one MNA in government on the CAQ, we have begun to close that gap. And it's I could throw numbers at you, but really what that means is more money for people in Laval. It means better infrastructures for our schools. It means better investments in our hospital. It means more money for our culture. And so all that adds up to better resources for the third largest city of Quebec. Think about that. So that locally makes me very proud. For other people in Laval, I think we forget, but that first year we did a heck of a lot. $3 billion we gave back to Quebecers, right? So we were the only ones talking about, making people richer before in 2018. We, in Laval, reduced the school tax by 55%. That means on average savings of about $500 to $800, depending on the value of your home, just for citizens of Laval. When you go to visit your grandma at the hospital, the first 2 hours are free, and then it's capped at $10. And we've all renewed our driver's license. You must have seen it. It's $24 to renew your driver's license. That was us. So there's been a lot of money returned, and I think that's something that people underestimate, especially now with rising inflation, that we were the party of the economy. We were the party of giving money back to you.
Tell me a little bit about St. Rose. Tell me a little bit about the riding.
St. Rose, every MNA will say they have the best riding. I will also say I have the best riding, but I'll tell you why. I can explain why. In St. Rose, we have Le Vieux Sainte-Rose, which we started off in, where my office is. And Le Vieux Sainte-Rose is like this beautiful little village, an insular village, where you still have people who have the last names of the streets. That have been there for 200 years. Right. They still live there. Wow. So there's that history and that tradition. We even have an association called l'Association des Résidents des Amis du Vieux Sainte-Rose. They actually have a historian who can tell you the history of each and every house that's there. That's fantastic. And we've supported them by creating plaques so that we can remember what happened. We just drove through La Ferme Sainte-Thérèse. La Ferme Sainte-Thérèse is like this little peninsula north, and it's the old cottages of Montreal. And there you'll find a community group that basically is an association of the residents. And they have parties like you can't believe. And not only that, but the old president threw a party for the 24th of June, Saint-Jean-Baptiste, and he basically left his door unlocked and left a note on the door saying, just come on in. Just come on in, yeah. So I showed up there at 8 o'clock, and the whole neighborhood was in his house. There was wine and cheese being served, and there was kids running around his house. And I think that speaks to me of community. Right. And another part of town that we have is the Champ-Fleury. L'Association Champ-Fleury does a race every year to keep the health of the individuals, and they have an association with a day camp, and they create community animations, and they have a haunted house, and so the whole community sort of rallies there. So you have an amazing small town feel for something that used to be a ville dortoir, a suburb. Yeah. Yet at the same time, when I want to talk about economy, George, all I got to do is go in my industrial area. And there I have M1 Composites. M1 Composites is this new SME basically conquering the market on replacing what Avios used to do. So they refurb Air Canada planes, Airbus planes, Boeing planes, military planes, right here in my riding. I have Aerodeftek that does the landing struts that landed on the moon. They're in my riding. I have also Pharmas, Bosch and Lomb is in my riding. So when I want to talk about the economy and I can want to put my MBA to use, well, all I got to go do is sit down with these crazy companies that are doing crazy things, like Le Sort, a leader in logistics that I'm going to go visit with Monsieur Fitzgibbon in a couple of weeks. So I have it all. I have a community that holds itself tight together, that is tight knit, and I have a dynamic industry of vibrant economic development. So I get to wear a lot of hats, and it's a lot of fun.
You mentioned before being the first candidate from an opposing party to break through this fortress that has forever been Laval, right?
Well, the first in recent history. The PQ used to be here. Yeah.
But I mean, for a long time, it was just red.
It was just red.
Yep. Tell me a little bit. We're looking at the numbers. The campaign obviously is still very early on. Anything can change until the end. It looks very promising. What's your confidence level? I mean, what results are we expecting for the region of Laval on the 3rd of October?
We're expecting to make gains. And when I say expecting, I should clarify. We're hoping to make gains. We're working towards making gains. I think people are ready to have more MNAs from the CAQ in Laval. And our mission every day is to make that happen. So you're right, polling is polling. It says a lot of things. I don't really believe in polling because I've been a victim of polling before.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't expect anything. I hope to make gains. I hope not to be alone anymore. And we're working hard to making sure that I'm not.
Fantastic. We're going to wrap it up. I know that you're a busy guy, and obviously I know what campaigning is like, so I don't want to take up too much of your schedule. Talk to me a little bit about your priorities in an eventual next mandate.
Yeah, for me, it's all about locally, the rise in crime. As a former peace officer, as a former customs officer, I think we could be doing more there. I think we should be prohibiting it at the border, yes, but I also think we need to be wary again as to the causes behind that. So we've invested a lot in prevention, but I want to see that through. I also, locally, there's a park, le Parc de la Rivière des Mille-Îles. I want us to protect more of that land. I want to help the city of Laval buy more land so that they can protect more land and keep it green and keep what's left of the greenery in Laval green. And also, I think we can't get around the reforms in healthcare. I think we need to do more in the reforms of healthcare. And finally, we're going to be there. I'm going to be there to help people with their wallet. I think people in Laval need a break, and we're going to give them that break.
Super. Christopher, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. It was good to finally meet you in person. Good luck for the rest of the campaign, and much success, man, going forward.
Thanks for the drive, thanks for the ride, and thanks for visiting St. Rose, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.